Welcome back to Tales of Knights and Magic. Subscribe if you like, and now get comfortable and enjoy this glimpse into the world of fantasy. Under the oppressive shroud of a moonless night, Sir Roderick found himself awake on a cold, rain-lashed rooftop overlooking a ruined city, where the skeletal remains of what once had been the grand Ashen Cathedral pierced the darkness like forlorn sentinels of forgotten glory. His heart pounded in unyielding cadence with the rhythm of distant thunder, and his sleep, violently fractured by relentless haunting visions, left him shivering in sweat and regret. In his dreams, vivid and inescapable dragon spirits roared with both fury and sorrow, their blazing eyes and colossal wings filling his mind with a sense of urgent destiny. These nocturnal apparitions were no mere fantasy. Each dream bore the unmistakable mark of flame-blood magic, the ancient and forbidden force that had once coursed through the cathedral's hallowed halls. Roderick, a once proud knight now tarnished by disgrace and burdened by a legacy of regret, felt the embers of power stir within him as though destiny itself had kindled a flame that refused to be extinguished. Slowly, as the rain poured over him and the battered walls of the cathedral loomed in spectral silhouette against the stormy skies, he made his way downward through twisting alleys and crumbling passageways, guided by an inner light that pulsed like the heartbeat of a long-dormant dragon. Every step was a struggle against despair, every footfall a defiant beat against the weight of years spent in exile and self-reproach. He recalled the words of his mentors and the murmurings of his heart, which had once believed that power was both a gift and a curse, a gift that could mend the wounds of the past if wielded with honor and restraint, and a curse that ensnared the soul when abused or taken for granted. Now, as he approached the ruined entrance to the Ashen Cathedral, that very dichotomy played out in his mind with relentless clarity. The cathedral, its towering arches now broken and draped in ivy like the skeletal hands of a giant, stood as a testament to a bygone era when magic and valor had danced together in harmony. Its stained glass windows, though shattered and scattered, still whispered of ancient rituals and the sacred communion of flame blood, a power that had once burned in symphony with the hopes of a people who dared dream of transcendence. Roderick paused at the threshold, the chill night air mingling with a palpable heat that emanated from the very stones beneath his feet. A deep, almost imperceptible thrum, a heartbeat of the forgotten course through the crumbling floor. In that moment, the siren call of the dragons, majestic, sorrowful, and commanding, coursed through his veins, reminding him of his origin and the sacred duty that still beckoned him from the depths of obscurity. He entered slowly, each step measured as though he might awaken something perilous from within the shattered remnants of the sanctum. The interior of the cathedral was a labyrinth of shadow and light, where moonbeams fought feebly against the dense darkness, and the air was charged with the residue of spells long since cast. Here, amidst broken pews and shattered relics, lay the vestiges of a time when knights and mages joined forces to honor the dragon spirits that blessed them with flame-blood magic. Roderick's memories of that time were as bittersweet as they were blurred, a collage of radiant battles, sorrowful farewells, and the almost mystical communion of man and magic. Now, with the specter of his own fallen honor haunting his every step, he felt that ancient bond stirring within him, a warmth that defied the chill of the night. At the far end of the nave, where a colossal weathered door once sealed the sacred inner chamber, he paused in reverence. Carvings etched into the stone depicted mighty dragons in flight, their scales rendered in exquisite detail by the skilled hands of long-departed artisans. It was here that the altar, the heart of the cathedral's legacy, resided. The air around it shimmered faintly, as if the boundary between the physical realm and the ethereal had grown thin enough to allow secrets to seep through. Roderick extended a trembling hand toward the altar, his fingertips grazing the cold, rough surface. In that instant, memories surged, a childhood reverence for tales of dragons, heroic knights, and a luminous magic that promised redemption. The sensation was intoxicating, as though a dormant part of his soul had finally been awakened by the touch of destiny. As the hours crept by in a haze of self-reflection and awakening energy, the cathedral seemed to come alive under his presence. Faint echoes of chants, intermingled with the crackle of unseen flames, reverberated through the halls. It was not the wind, but the very voices of the past, the remnants of 1,000 prayers offered to the dragon spirits, that now greeted him. With every echo, Sir Roderick's internal struggle eased, replaced instead by a burgeoning resolve. He recalled the secret teachings of the old order, the words whispered on stormy nights when his heart had been heavy with regret. Those teachings spoke of a sacred covenant between the knight and the dragon spirits, a binding ritual known as the Flameblood Rite. Once it had been a means for the pure-hearted to channel the divine fire of creation, a process that imbued them with not only physical strength and agility, but an unyielding moral compass. Over time, however, the rite had been tainted by ambition and the lust for unbridled power, and its purity had been lost. Roderick, long shunned from the circles of his former brethren, now felt an inexplicable pull toward reclaiming that lost honor. The dragon spirits, in his dreams, had demanded that he restore the cathedral and rekindle its dying flame, a beacon to guide not only him but all those lost in the darkness of corruption. Though his body bore the scars of countless battles fought in regret and regretful solitude, his eyes now burned with a dawning clarity, as if the very fire of the dragons had kindled anew within him. In the depths of the Ashen Cathedral, amidst the interplay of decaying stone and resurrected hope, he began to speak aloud the ancient incantations passed down in hushed tones. His voice, rough and laden with emotion, filled the empty space, reverberating off the cold, damp walls. At first there was only silence, an almost palpable stillness that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. But then, as if stirred by the sound of his plea, a soft glow began to emanate from within the altar. The light was not a blazing conflagration, but rather a gentle pulsing ember that echoed the heartbeat of the long-dormant cathedral. It danced along the carvings and traced the outlines of the broken windows, scattering the oppressive darkness and filling the space with the promise of renewal. In that moment, Roderick's dormant flame-blood power surged within him. He felt the heat of dragon's breath ignite deep in his core, and a startling clarity filled his mind, a vision of what once was and what could be again. His soul, battered by years of neglect and self-imposed exile, recognized the ancient magic as both a reminder of his former glory and a call to redemption. The anguished cries of the dragon spirits that had haunted his dreams transformed into a resounding chorus of hope, urging him onward. In the luminous glow at the heart of the altar, images flickered. Visions of majestic dragons soaring over a restored cathedral, knights clad in brilliant armor marching in unison towards a future unburdened by past sins, and a people united under the banner of a renewed legacy of honor and sacrifice. As the echoing light mingled with his incantations, Roderick felt as though he were standing at the threshold of a profound transformation. Every fiber of his being resonated with the undulating rhythm of flame-blood magic, a magic that was as ancient as it was elemental, and as cruel as it was capable of bestowing renewal. The cathedral, long silent and forsaken, now pulsed with the vibrancy of a living relic. Its haunted beauty, marred by decay yet dignified in its desolation, served as a fitting vessel for the resurrection of an old legacy. In that sacred convergence of past and present, the weight of Roderick's disgrace and sorrow began to lift, replaced by the resolute determination to reclaim not only his honor but the sacred bond that had once united him with the dragon spirits. Emboldened by the rekindled flame within him, he traversed the ruined nave with newfound purpose. His footsteps, echoing softly on the time-worn marble, led him toward a small, secluded chamber at the edge of the cathedral, a space once reserved for the deepest meditations and the most fervent prayers of the order. There, amid remnants of ancient murals depicting dragons in celestial combat and knights in glorious triumph, Roderick allowed himself a moment of introspection. He recalled the days when he had been among the chosen, a knight whose spirit had burned with the promise of eternal valor and sacrifice. The relentless passage of time and the burdens of unspoken failings had dimmed that brilliant light until only a faint ember remained. Now, as that ember roared to life and spread its warmth through his weary frame, he realized that the awakening was not solely a personal rebirth. It was a call to restore the dying cathedral, and with it the sacred legacy of the Flame-Blood Rite. A sudden gust of wind, as if summoned by the ancient powers still lingering within the cathedral's bones, swept through the chamber and scattered loose fragments of parchment and dust. In that stirring, Roderick saw a vision, a great luminous dragon, its scales shimmering like molten gold, its eyes deep pools of ancient wisdom, and its roar a clarion call to a destiny long postponed. The vision was as fleeting as it was powerful, a spectral image that surged through his mind with the promise of both absolution and terrible sacrifice. It was a reminder that the cathedral and the magic it harbored could not be reclaimed by mere mortals without first paying the price demanded by the ancient covenant. Yet even as the vision began to fade, its impact remained. Etched into his soul was the undeniable truth that his fate, and that of the lost legacy of the cathedral, was inexorably bound to the dragon spirits. Roderick's pulse quickened as he sank to his knees before the altar, a physical manifestation of his reverence and contrition for past transgressions. In the flickering light that danced around him, he pledged an unspoken oath to reclaim the sacred flame-blood magic in its true form, to mend the fractured covenant between the mortal world and the hallowed dragon spirits, and to awaken the Ashen Cathedral from its long, sorrowful slumber. His voice, rough with emotion and edged with determination, rose in a solitary vow that echoed in the empty spaces of the ruined sanctuary. I, Roderick, once lost to disgrace and despair, shall reclaim the fire of my soul and restore this sacred place to its rightful glory. Let the embers of truth be my guide, and the spirit of the dragons my eternal flame. As his words faded into the stillness, a gentle warmth enveloped him, a tangible affirmation that the ancient bond had been renewed, however fleeting the moment might be. In the depths of that sacred night, amidst the shattered relics of a forgotten age and the tender promise of rekindled magic, Sir Roderick took his first decisive steps on the long path to redemption. The roar of dragons in his dreams had become a clarion call in his waking hours, and the ruined Ashen Cathedral, once a monument to loss, now shuddered with the stirring promise of rebirth. Though the night was far from over, and the road ahead fraught with peril and sacrifice, a single incandescent truth glowed steadily in Roderick's heart. The time had come to embrace the flame-blood magic anew, to become the harbinger of a legacy reborn from the ashes of the past. And so, under the relentless gaze of a storm-racked sky, and amidst the spectral remnants of lost hopes, Sir Roderick began his solitary journey. Each step through the cathedral's echoing halls was a step away from the chains of his former disgrace, and each whispered incantation was a promise to the dragon spirits, a promise that the sacred fire of the flame blood would once again illuminate a world long shrouded in darkness. With the ancient energy of the cathedral surging through him like a tidal force, he stepped forward into an uncertain dawn, carrying with him the embers of an old legacy, and the seeds of a transformation that could have nurtured, restore both his honor and the lost magnificence of a time when dragons roamed the skies, and magic burned bright in the hearts of those brave enough to wield it. Leaving behind the embers of his solitary renewal in the cathedral, Roderick emerged into a twilight world where ruined spires and shattered stained glass still told muted tales of glory. The cold, damp air of the outer city embraced him as he ventured along desolate cobblestone streets, every echo a reminder of lost splendor. The visions that had long haunted his sleep now propelled him forward. In his heart, the roar of draconic spirits, once confined to fevered dreams, now demanded to be shared with those capable of restoring what had been almost entirely forgotten. His first steps led him away from the sanctum's silent halls and into the labyrinthine alleys of a forsaken quarter of the city. Here, the ghosts of a bygone era lingered among half-collapsed arches and vine-choked columns. Roderick's path was lit only by the dim glow of a dying lantern he carried, a feeble yet steadfast beacon amid omnipresent decay. He recalled the teachings of his old mentors, each lesson a delicate blend of martial discipline and mystical lore. Every piece of advice whispered of the strength found not in solitary valor, but in the bond shared among kindred spirits. And so, with resolve growing as his feet carried him farther from his ruined sanctuary, Roderick set forth to find those who could join him in his sacred endeavor. The first of these companions emerged unexpectedly in a narrow corridor between crumbling masonry and the overgrown market squares, where even nature itself had begun to reclaim man's once proud designs. There, beneath a faded mural depicting a phoenix rising among celestial clouds, stood Lady Eleanor. Her presence was at once ethereal and commanding, a striking figure in a flowing mantle that seemed woven from the very fabric of ember magic. The light about her danced in subtle ripples, animated by a gentle, almost secret laughter that belied the hardship of her past trials. Her eyes, sharp and luminous, locked onto Roderick's as if she had long anticipated his arrival. "Sir Roderick," she greeted, her voice a mellifluous blend of warmth and authority. The winds have whispered your name, carrying with them the memories of lost vows and the promise of renewed might. There was a quiet grace in her tone that spoke both of sorrow for what had been sacrificed and hope for what could yet be salvaged. Without hesitation, Roderick reached out, his calloused hand meeting hers in a gesture of unspoken kinship. In that brief connection, the dormant flicker of flame blood magic within them surged with a subtle intensity, as if the ancient dragons had finally recognized the true heirs of their sacred covenant. Eleanor led him away from the ruins of the marketplace to a hidden courtyard nestled behind derelict stone walls overrun by ivy. In the soft glow of twilight, amid the murmuring leaves and the sweet, lingering scent of forgotten incense, she recounted the story of her own journey. Once a promising mage in the service of a noble order, she had been cast into exile after uncovering forbidden lore on the nature of ember magic, a discipline that allowed its practitioners to channel healing warmth and lethal fire in equal measure. Her passion had never waned. Instead, the trials of recent times had transformed her into a guardian of secrets, dedicated to preserving and reviving the lost arts that once linked mortal souls to the incandescent heart of the flame blood. Roderick listened intently, the cadence of her words stirring memories of his own youthful days when dreams burned bright and the promise of transformation was within reach. I have seen the dying embers of our past, he confessed softly, and I fear that without allies who understand the true nature of our bond, the flame that once united us will be extinguished by the encroaching darkness. Eleanor's gaze deepened with understanding. Then we must find those whose hearts have remained uncorrupted by despair, she declared, for the path to restoration lies in reuniting not the power alone, but the spirits who can kindle it anew. Their conversation was soon interrupted by the arrival of a third figure, a quiet, contemplative presence emerging from the shadowy recesses of the courtyard. Clad in the worn robes of a scholar monk, Brother Bastien carried an air of restrained solemnity that contrasted with the vibrant energy of Lady Eleanor. His eyes, deep and reflective, held the weight of forbidden knowledge and the sorrow of what the passage of time had wrought upon ancient relics of power. I have long awaited this day, he intoned in a measured cadence that resonated with the wisdom of ages. The sacred vaults beneath our ruined sanctuary beckon us, offering secrets that only the lost can understand. If the rites you speak of exist, then together we may yet find the means to command our true destiny. Bastien's words, steeped in an erudite melancholy, lent gravity to the nascent alliance. For years he had guarded the keys to a network of secret vaults hidden under the cathedral and scattered throughout the labyrinth of the old city, a repository of arcane relics and fragile manuscripts chronicling the original flame blood rite. These vaults, long shrouded in silence and darkness, were said to hold the knowledge necessary for a communion with the dragon spirits that had ignited Roderick's visions. With their arrival, the trio sensed that fate had conspired to reunite them at this critical juncture. Thus, under the waning light of dusk, the newly formed fellowship set off toward the hidden vaults. Their journey took them through twisting subterranean passages beneath crumbling streets and forgotten courtyards, where only the whispers of history could be heard. The passageways, carved long ago by dedicated artisans of a lost epoch, were dimly lit by the phosphorescence of ancient glyphs etched along the walls. These inscriptions told fragmented tales of the flame blood, of draconic might channeled through mortal vessels, and of the solemn promise that had once bound knights, mages, and clerics alike in a covenant of rebirth and sacrifice. Every step through the labyrinth was fraught with the sense of approaching destiny. Along narrow, winding corridors, the steady echo of their combined footsteps merged with the silent hymn of the past, a melody of hope, despair, and the inexorable passage of time. At times the air was thick with dust and the scent of crumbling parchment, each inhalation a sensory reminder of the secrets long concealed beneath the ruin. Occasionally, a burst of ember magic from Eleanor's outstretched hand would ignite brief flares of light, momentarily banishing the oppressive gloom, and each such burst was a testament to their shared resolve. Hours passed and the trio arrived at a heavy iron door, rusted by years of neglect and overgrown with tendrils of vegetation. This was the entrance to the most revered vault, a repository of forbidden texts and relics that held the original instructions of the flame blood rite. With careful deliberation, Brother Bastien produced a weathered key from within the folds of his robe, a delicate artifact of silver and etched runes that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly glow. "This key," he murmured, "has guarded the vault for generations. It is said that only those who are pure of heart and unburdened by false ambition may unlock its secrets. The key slipped easily into the ornate lock, and with a metallic groan that echoed like a wail from the past, the door slowly swung open. Beyond lay a chamber of breathtaking wonder, a hidden sanctum where the remnants of ancient flameblood ceremonies lay preserved in an almost mystical stillness. Shelves carved from blackened stone were laden with fragile scrolls, crystalline vials filled with shimmering ember-like substances, and intricately designed relics that resonated with the lost aura of draconic majesty. In the center of the chamber, an imposing altar stood, adorned with carvings of dragons in mid-flight and encircled by a ring of luminous glyphs that seemed to hum softly with forgotten incantations. This altar was not merely an artifact, but the symbolic heart of the ancient rite, a beacon to summon and harness the primordial fire that once soared through the heavens. Overwhelmed by the gravity of the discovery, the trio gathered around the altar. Roderick, feeling the dormant power within him quiver in anticipation, extended a hand to trace the delicate patterns etched in the stone. His fingertips met the cool, smooth surface of the altar, and in that instant, a surge of inexplicable energy coursed through him, a mingling of memory and potential that filled his veins with both warmth and urgency. Lady Eleanor's eyes shimmered as she carefully unrolled a brittle scroll that lay atop the altar, its faded ink revealing instructions written in an archaic dialect of elemental lore. "This is the key," she whispered reverently, "the very blueprint of the Flameblood Rite, as it was originally conceived by the dragon priests of old." Brother Bastian, ever the silent sentinel, nodded solemnly as he scanned the scroll with a learned gaze. His years of study and custodianship of forgotten lore had prepared him for this very moment, a moment where the destiny of a broken legacy might be restored by the power of unity and truth. "The texts speak of a communion," he intoned, his voice resonant with quiet authority, "a ritual designed not for the amplification of mere might, but for the harmonious integration of mortal spirit and divine flame. It is said that only through such communion can the true essence of the Flameblood be awakened, not as a weapon of domination, but as a beacon of hope and redemption." Roderick's heart swelled as he listened to Bastian's measured words, each syllable fanning the flickering flame of conviction deep within him. Here in this sanctum beneath the ruins of a once sacred cathedral, the possibility of reclaiming not just lost power, but a reborn legacy became tangible. The scroll detailed, in its faded calligraphy, the steps of the ancient rite, a series of incantations interwoven with gestures of reverence, a sequence of symbols to be invoked in unison by a fellowship of pure intent. It was a testament to a time when the connection between dragon and mortal was forged not in the fires of ambition, but in a shared vision of transformation and unity. As the trio pored over the sacred texts, the sanctum seemed to come alive with faint, almost imperceptible vibrations. The very walls hummed with the echoes of long-departed chants, and the relics themselves shivered in response to the stirring energy. The experience was as much a communion of spirit as it was a scholarly pursuit, a sacred conversation between those present and the ancient forces that had crafted the lore. Each new symbol decoded, each ritual gesture deciphered, deepened their collective understanding of the Flameblood's true nature. They came to realize that their mission was not simply to harness a forgotten power, but to reclaim its purity and restore the balance that had been lost through generations of misused ambition. In the cool, still air of the vault, the three allies shared hushed vows, a mutual promise that the secrets they uncovered would be used not to subjugate or dominate, but to kindle the light of a reborn legacy. Their voices, though soft, carried the weight of centuries, binding them together in a pact of eternal vigilance and shared honor. Through the interplay of shadows and the fading glow of ancient runes, Roderick, Eleanor, and Bastian felt the first stirrings of what might become a new chapter, one where the reverence for the Flameblood was restored and its sacred fire, rather than being a curse, would guide them to a future unmarred by the hubris of old. Outside the sanctum, the city lay in a state of quiet desolation. The ruins that once echoed with the jubilant cries of a thriving civilization now whispered only the regrets of lost time. Yet amid the decay, the faint promise of renewal blossomed like a fragile flower breaking through the cracks in forgotten cobblestones. Roderick's heart, still aflame with the resonance of the ancient rite, beat with a renewed determination. He knew that their journey had only just begun, and that the path ahead would be laden with challenges, from confronting the malignant forces that once defiled the sacred flame blood to uniting a scattered band of champions willing to stand against the encroaching darkness. Together, the trio emerged from the vault, carrying with them not only the wisdom of the ancient texts, but the embers of hope that burned brighter with every shared memory and every whispered vow. The night had deepened around them, yet in that darkness lay the promise of a dawn that would see the rekindling of the lost covenant between mortal hearts and the divine blaze of dragon spirits. They stepped into the open air, their shadows merging with the ruins as they began the arduous trek back through the labyrinthine streets toward the outer reaches of the city, a journey that would demand every ounce of strength, faith, and unity they could muster. Every step was an affirmation of their resolve, a silent rebellion against the forces that sought to plunge their world back into despair. As they navigated crumbling archways and dilapidated alleys, the echoes of ancient chants and the soft hum of magical incantations reverberated in their minds, serving as a constant reminder of their sacred mission. The alliance they had formed in that hidden courtyard was more than a collection of disparate souls. It was the embodiment of a vision in which the true spirit of the flame blood was resurrected, not through brute power, but through unity, sacrifice, and the gentle rekindling of hope. Thus, as the trio advanced into the uncertain night, carrying with them the luminous legacy of forbidden rites and the promise of an era untainted by darkness, a subtle determination began to take root. They would seek out further allies, those scattered remnants of the old order and even new guardians of forgotten lore to widen the circle of unity. For only by uniting the disparate echoes of a once magnificent covenant could they hope to confront the inevitable challenges that loomed on the horizon and forge a future where the sacred fire of the flame blood would illuminate the way forward. With the weight of ancient knowledge in their hearts and the dim promise of dawn in the distance, Roderick, Eleanor, and Bastian continued their journey, a pilgrimage into the depths of mystery, a quest driven by the unquenchable desire to restore not only their own honor, but the legacy of a time when dragons and mortals stood side by side, their spirits forever intertwined in the luminous dance of creation and renewal. In the wake of their secretive meeting beneath the ancient vault, the murmurs of renewal had scarcely faded when the first ominous signs of unrest rippled through the city's forgotten quarters. As dusk gave way to a night heavy with impending dread, a far-off roar, a sound not of nature but of calculated destructive intent, reverberated through narrow alleyways and deserted squares. The cool air was suddenly cleaved by bursts of unnatural heat, and across the horizon, unholy firestorms began to devour clusters of ruined buildings and neglected homes. These flames did not burn with the steady, life-giving warmth of ember magic, but with a wild, unrestrained fury, as if the very essence of the primordial blaze had been twisted into a weapon of terror. Sir Roderick, still reeling from his awakening within the cathedral and the sacred communion that had relit his inner fire, was roused from his reverie by frantic clamor and the acrid tang of burning wood carried on the wind. His thoughts turned immediately to the fragile alliance he had begun to forge with Lady Eleanor and Brother Bastian. The visions of dragon spirits and the promise of reclamation now contended with a new menacing force, one not born of noble intent but of corrosive zealotry. With hurried determination, he mounted his horse once more and set forth toward the outskirts, where the indistinct shapes of villagers fleeing unholy conflagrations flickered like ghosts under a turbulent sky. Roderick's journey through the twilight streets was a disorienting blur of shadow and flame. The once familiar cobblestone paths now bore the scars of chaos, walls scarred by searing heat, broken windows framing scenes of desperate escape, and the ever-looming silhouettes of ancient spires that seemed to shudder under the weight of dark portent. The knight's heart pounded as he reached the edge of the central quarter where whispers of a rising cult had begun to spread like wildfire. It was said that a group of ardent zealots, calling themselves the Ember Covenant, had emerged from the depths of obscurity, a band of madmen and misfits who believed that the time of the old order had passed and that the primordial fire, long sealed away by reason and ritual, must be unleashed to purge the world of its mortal frailties. In a narrow lane lined with broken statues and half-collapsed archways, Roderick encountered his first sign of this new threat. A small band of cloaked figures, faces hidden beneath hoods and eyes gleaming with a manic intensity, had gathered around a makeshift pyre. The flames leaped unpredictably, not in the warm, organized dance of controlled ember magic, but in violent, sputtering arcs that sent sparks darting into the murky air. Their voices rose in a discordant chant, a frenzied litany that exalted chaos and the destructive potential of unbridled fire. Roderick halted, his grip tightening on his sword hilt. He recognized in their fervor a dangerous ideology, one that rejected the balanced sacred communion of flame-blood magic in favor of a raw anarchic force that promised neither order nor redemption. The cult's incantations were laced with venomous words, accusations against the old guardians, vilification of past traditions, and promises of an apocalyptic rebirth purified by the cleansing inferno. Without delay, the night pressed forward, following the trail of destruction that stretched further into the dark outskirts. Along the winding roads, where abandoned cottages and dilapidated granaries bore witness to the chaos, Roderick's steed trotted with a measured urgency. The closer he came, the more palpable the tension in the air became, a pregnant, unyielding silence before the storm of fanaticism struck. Here, in a forgotten hamlet ringed with scorched earth and blackened remnants of what once was a peaceful community, he found the aftermath of the cult's unholy wrath. Homes were reduced to molten ruins. Desperate figures, their eyes wide with terror and disbelief, huddled in the remnants of shelter. The toll of the Ember Covenant's incursion was etched on every scarred wall and every silent face. Roderick dismounted and knelt beside a collapsed doorway, his gaze softening as he helped an elderly man from the rubble. The man's hands were singed, his skin a patchwork of scars and soot, and yet his eyes held a glimmer of acknowledgement as he murmured prayers to lost gods. They came from the west by the old road, the old man rasped, voice shaking not solely from fever, but from the shock of witnessing an unholy force unleashed. They chant in tongues unknown, and the flames they burn with a fury that is not of our making. The weight of these words pressed heavily on Roderick's soul, for they signified a turning point, a divergence from the disciplined sacred ember magic that he and his allies had sworn to protect. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Roderick, deep within the labyrinthine corridors of a defunct temple at the edge of the hamlet, Lady Eleanor and Brother Bastian were quietly gathering intelligence. They had sensed disturbances in the aura of ember magic, an interference that resonated with the dark energies of the cult. Eleanor, whose delicate command over her element had often been her solace, now felt a roiling unease as if the very essence of her power was being skewed by malevolent interference. In a discreet alcove carved into the temple's crumbling walls, she met Bastian, who had been poring over ancient manuscripts salvaged from the ruins. His voice was hushed yet urgent as he revealed his findings. The texts speak of a time when the fire was set free, not to be confined by mortal mandates. The Ember Covenant seeks to abandon the sacred rites that tempered our power, instead embracing an untamed conflagration that will consume all in its path. They believe that only through uncontrollable destruction can a rebirth be forced upon us. Her eyes narrowed as she listened, the fire of her conviction mingling with sorrow. Eleanor knew that such a path would herald calamity, a world where the delicate balance between creation and chaos would be shattered. "We must stop them," she declared softly, her voice carrying the dual weight of her magic and her heartbreak. "If we allow this unholy uprising to continue unchecked, all that we have rebuilt may be lost in the flames of fanaticism." Though their voices were subdued, their determination was as fierce as ever. Reunited by fate, Roderick, Eleanor, and Bastian soon converged at the outskirts of the embattled hamlet. Standing before a smoldering ruin that once had been a modest dwelling, they exchanged solemn glances, a silent pact to restore not only order but the true spirit of the Flame-Blood Covenant. Roderick's eyes, still alight with the embers of his renewed purpose, burned with quiet fury. "They are using our sacred force as a weapon to tear apart the bonds that hold communities together," he growled, his voice a mix of grief and steely resolve. "The Ember Covenant's zeal blinds them to the cost of their rebellion. They seek not renewal but oblivion." Without waiting for further deliberation, the trio set off to track the cult's movements. Their pursuit led them through twisted back alleys, along forgotten roads, and into the wild outskirts where nature itself appeared to recoil from the disruptive scourge of unbridled flame. Under a canopy of storm-darkened skies, they reached a makeshift encampment hidden in a decrepit barn. There, amid the ragged banners proclaiming twisted symbols of fire and destruction, the cultists had assembled, their chants erratic and fervent, filled the damp air as they prepared for another diabolical incantation, one that promised to unleash a conflagration upon a neighboring settlement. From their concealed vantage, Roderick and his allies observed the gathering with a mixture of heartbreak and determination. Lady Eleanor's gaze swept over the assembly, noting the wild abandon in their movements, the way their eyes glittered not with hope but with the ruinous promise of annihilation. Brother Bastian's hand tightened around a weathered tome, as if the ancient words might lend him strength to counter the madness he now witnessed. "They have forgotten that true ember magic is a gift meant to nurture and protect," he whispered, the sorrow in his tone punctuated by the resolve of a man who had spent his life guarding sacred lore. "Instead, they have embraced ruin, and in doing so they jeopardize everything we have fought to reclaim." At that moment, the quiet was shattered by a sudden violent burst from within the cult's midst. A towering figure, clad in scarlet robes and bearing an aura of disturbing brilliance, stepped forward as the proclaimed leader of the Ember Covenant. His voice boomed over the clamor, rich with conviction and perilous promise. "Arise, children of the primordial blaze, cast off the chains of earthly limitation, and embrace the inferno that shall purify this wretched land. Let the old order burn, for in the conflagration lies rebirth." The leader's arms lifted to the heavens, and his words summoned a surge of unholy energy that twisted the air into sparks of chaotic flame, setting the encampment ablaze with an intensity that belied its corrupt origins. The sudden eruption of incendiary magic was like a call to war. In that instant, Roderick's resolve solidified into action. With a swift command that sliced through the tumult, he ordered his allies to mobilize. Eleanor, her face hardened with determination, channeled her ember magic with practiced precision, summoning walls of searing heat and concentrated blasts of fire to stymie the cultists' advance. Bastian, drawing upon the ancient incantations of his long-guarded texts, murmured invocations that wove a protective veil of arcane energy around their small band. The ensuing clash was explosive, a tapestry of roiling flames, searing heat, and the acrid tang of smoldering wood as the cultists hurled themselves into the fray with manic fervor. Amid the chaos, the camp transformed into a battleground where the ideals of creation and destruction collided violently. The leader of the Ember Covenant advanced with a predatory grace, his every movement imbued with the twisted promise of unrestrained flame. Roderick met his onslaught head-on, their blades clashing in sparks that illuminated the darkness in bursts of crimson light. Each strike was accompanied by the roar of fans, the anguished primal sound of unbridled fire. The air churned with heat and ash as the battle raged, and the ground itself trembled beneath the weight of the unleashed magic. Eleanor's role in the skirmish was as measured as it was vital. She moved through the fiery melee with an almost otherworldly agility, her hands weaving intricate symbols in the air that summoned bursts of tempered flame to intercept the cultists' attacks. Her incantations resonated with both beauty and sorrow, a reminder of what ember magic once was, a harmonious blend of warmth, healing, and righteous power. Even as the cultists' chaotic fervor threatened to overwhelm their defenses, her eyes shone with a steadfast calm, a beacon amid the tempest of destructive ambition. On the periphery of the melee, Brother Bastian recited passages from his venerable tome, his incantations forming a counterbalance to the disruptive chaos. His words, imbued with the authority of ancient lore, reverberated through the battlefield, sowing seeds of doubt among the more fanatical cultists. For a fleeting moment, as if stirred by the solemn cadence of his prayers, the maddened cries subsided, replaced by a disoriented hesitation, a brief lapse in the cult's unrelenting assault. But the Ember Covenant would not be quelled so easily. With renewed fury, the cult leader unleashed a devastating surge of dark flame, a conflagration that defied the very laws of ember magic and sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The inferno spread rapidly, engulfing nearby barricades and threatening to reduce both friend and foe to ash. Roderick, feeling the full force of this destructive tide, roared a challenge and plunged into its center, determined to confront the man who had transformed sacred fire into an instrument of annihilation. Their blades met amid the swirling vortex of heat and smoke, each strike a testament to the clashing ideologies, one the disciplined sacred art of flame blood, reviving an ancient covenant, and the other a reckless embrace of chaos that sought to tear down the very fabric of order. As the duel intensified, Roderick's heart surged with a mixture of sorrow and righteous indignation. Every parry, every calculated thrust, was an effort to reclaim not just his honor but the purity of the legacy that had once bound knights, mages, and dragon spirits together in a covenant of renewal. Across the battlefield, the combatants around them fought with a desperation that spoke of deep-seated wounds and unspoken betrayals. In the midst of the inferno, alliances were tested, and the fragile unity that Roderick, Eleanor, and Bastian had so painstakingly built began to waver under the relentless assault of fanaticism. Through the chaos, the cult leader's eyes burned with a wild, almost feral delight, a glimpse of madness that revealed the true heart of his ambition. "Burn," he bellowed, his voice rising above the clash of steel and the roar of unholy flames. "Let the old order crumble beneath the weight of its own corruption, and be reborn in the cleansing fire of damnation." His words, echoing with the promise of catastrophic renewal, sent shivers of dread through those who heard them. Yet even as his incantations threatened to tip the scales toward utter ruin, a spark of defiance burned bright in Roderick's soul. With one final, earth-shaking blow, Roderick broke through the cult leader's defenses, their blades ringing out like the tolling of a death knell for an era of unbridled destruction. In that critical moment, the energies of the battlefield seemed to converge, a convergence of controlled ember magic and the reckless inferno of the cult. The impact of their clash sent a shockwave rippling outward, momentarily quieting the surrounding chaos. In the brief stillness that followed, as embers floated in the acrid air, Roderick's chest heaved with the weight of both victory and sorrow. Around him, the faces of his allies shone with grim determination, yet beneath their hardened exteriors lay a palpable uncertainty. The rising threat of the Ember Covenant was but the first stage of a far greater struggle against a force that sought to redefine the boundaries of power. Though the cultists were momentarily halted, the rising threat had laid bare the rift between sacred tradition and fanatical anarchy. As Roderick surveyed the smoldering remnants of the encampment, he could feel the dark promise of the cult, an insidious force that would seek to spread, ignited by zealotry and the perverse reinterpretation of ember magic. In the distance, the wail of sirens, whether the anguished cries of the forsaken or the haunting lament of a dying legacy, echoed across the ruined hamlet, a mournful reminder that the true battle was only beginning. Determined to stem the tide of chaos, Roderick called out to his companions. "We must not let this madness spread unchecked. We have secured a momentary reprieve here, but our work is far from done," he declared, his voice rising above the fading clamor of fire and fury. Lady Eleanor and Brother Bastian exchanged resolute nods, their expressions etched with the shared burden of protecting a covenant under siege. They knew that the struggle ahead would demand both the restoration of lost truths and the unyielding courage to stand against forces that would see their world reduced to ash. In that decisive moment, as the inferno of the cultist's dark ambition began to recede into the cold aftermath of battle, the resolve of Roderick's band of guardians crystallized. Though heavy with grief for what had been sacrificed and marked by the scars of unholy flame, their unity shone like a beacon in the encroaching darkness. The rising threat had tested their alliance, sowing seeds of discord and fear, yet it had also sharpened their determination to reclaim the true essence of flame blood, a covenant that balanced the brilliance of divine fire with the mercy of human compassion. As the survivors gathered amid the ruins of the encampment, tending to the wounded and consoling the grieving, a tacit vow was forged in silence. A vow that they would confront the Ember Covenant's insatiable hunger for chaos at its root, even if that meant venturing into the heart of darkness itself. In the weary eyes of those who remained, there burned a quiet promise that the sacred fire of the dragons, though imperiled by the unholy flame, would not be allowed to die without a final defiant cry of redemption. Thus, as night deepened, and the scorched landscape lay bathed in the ghostly light of a waning moon, Roderick, Eleanor, and Bastian steeled themselves for the long road ahead, a road beset by the rising threat of fanaticism, where every spark of ember magic must be guarded as a precious legacy, and every act of unity would be the cornerstone of a future reclaimed from the grip of destructive zeal. And in that battered, embattled stillness, the call to restore balance resounded, echoing through the shattered streets and hollow courtyards as the battle for the true essence of flame blood had only just begun. Beneath the shattered vaults of the Ashen Cathedral, where lost hymns once echoed in reverence and hope, Chaos now reigns supreme. The grand sanctuary, its soaring arches fractured by time and neglect, trembled under the onslaught of an unholy force. Sir Roderick, his flame blood burning brighter than ever in defiance of the encroaching darkness, led his ragged band of guardians into the heart of this desolation. The air was thick with heat and the acrid tang of brimstone, while spectral embers drifted like lost souls around the broken columns. This was not the sanctum of serene devotion it had once been, but a crucible where the elemental fury of sacred fire was waged against the anarchic blaze of corrupted zeal. The first enemy forces appeared like wraiths emerging from the depths of a nightmare, cultists of the Ember Covenant, their eyes alight with madness, and their cloaks billowing in the searing winds, stormed through a breach in one of the ancient stone walls. Their torches and ritualistic braziers cast lurid, flickering shadows that danced upon crumbled reliefs of dragons and saints, rendering the sacred images grotesque in the firelight. With a raucous cry, they hurled themselves into the fray, intent on defiling what remained of the hallowed site. Roderick raised his sword, a blade tempered in dragon fire and inscribed with ancient runes that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow. His voice, hoarse but resolute, rang out above the din. Defend the legacy of the flame blood. Stand fast and let our sacred fire expel this corruption. At his call, his comrades rallied. Lady Eleanor, the lithe and fierce wielder of ember magic, moved like a flickering flame amidst the tumult. With graceful, precise gestures, she summoned barriers of searing heat that spiraled outward like protective halos, scattering the advancing cultists. Her eyes, reflecting the turbulent dance of flames and shadows, burned with determined intensity as she incanted ancient words, verses of old meant to channel the benevolent essence of ember magic. Every gesture unleashed bursts of concentrated energy. Each burst countered the maddened chants of the cult, dimming their unholy conflagration, if only for moments. In the midst of the conflict, Brother Bastian stood as a bastion of ancient wisdom and quiet power. Clad in the simple, time-worn robes of a scholar monk, he recited invocations from his treasured tome, each word resonating through the vaulted chamber. His incantations wove a defensive tapestry around the defenders, a shimmering shield of mystic energy that tempered the chaos with calm recollections of a purer past. Even as cultists hurled crude, frenzied attacks, Bastian's voice carried the gravity of centuries, momentarily halting the tide of destruction. With the promise of renewed order and reason, the battle surged and swirled like a living maelstrom. Amid collapsing arches and crumbling statues, the clang of steel and the hiss of elemental forces intertwined in a discordant symphony. Roderick confronted wave after wave of fanatical attackers. His every movement was a study in defiant precision. He parried a clumsy thrust, then riposted with a swift, decisive strike that sent a cultist reeling into a wall of heat. The runes on his sword flared as if in communion with his spirit, and every cut he dealt seemed to shimmer with the residual glow of dragon fire, the very essence of the sacred flame blood. Overhead, the once proud stained glass windows now lay shattered, their splintered remnants scattering rainbow fragments over the blood-stained stone floor. The remnants of holy light, mingled with the orange blaze of anger and defiance, lent the ruined cathedral an eerie, otherworldly beauty. Through these fractured panes, spectral forms of ancient dragon spirits appeared for fleeting moments, a reminder of the covenant that had once united mortals with the divine, even as those very bonds were being challenged tonight. Within the maelstrom of battle, the cult's leader emerged, a towering figure swathed in crimson robes that billowed as if aflame. His presence exuded an unsettling charisma, and his voice, when he spoke, was both a promise and a curse. Burn away the chains of false sanctuary. Embrace the inferno that purges all weakness and rebirths this barren land in the glory of unrestrained flame. His words, draped in mad zeal, cut through the clamor like a sharpened blade. As he raised his arms, dark fire coalesced around him, a swirling mass of corrupt primal energy that seemed determined to overthrow the very order that Roderick and his allies strove to protect. The cult leader's power surged, and he directed his baleful incantations towards the high nave of the cathedral. With a gesture, he unleashed a torrent of unholy flame that cascaded down like a waterfall of destruction. The flames, wild and untamed, engulfed columns and set entire sections of the sanctuary ablaze with hellish brilliance. The very walls groaned under the pressure of the incendiary assault, and as more cultists converged, the battle escalated into an all-consuming inferno. In the midst of this chaos, Roderick's band of guardians pressed forward with a desperation born of sacred duty. As the cult's foul fires spread, they maneuvered through the labyrinthine corridors of the cathedral, evading falling debris and streams of molten stone. Roderick himself charged through the fury, each step measured yet propelled by raw determination. His blade danced between strikes and parries, each motion a prayer in the language of combat, a rhythmic cadence that declared his unyielding refusal to allow the cult's desecration of the sacred site. Lady Eleanor's magic, now pushed to its limits, manifested in both radiant shields and blistering offensives. With each incantation, she called forth a shield of incandescent heat that momentarily suspended the wild flames, allowing her allies a brief respite. Then, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of fire, she unleashed counterattacks, arcs of purified flame that lanced into the ranks of the cultists, their passage leaving trails of glittering embers that symbolized hope amid ruin. Brother Bastian, his voice resonant with the arcane authority of lost ages, chanted tirelessly as he moved among the defenders. His incantations summoned ephemeral barriers, translucent yet unyielding, that intercepted the chaotic blasts of corrupt magic hurled by the enemy. The whispered verses of his ancient texts carved paths of stability through the tumult, offering brief sanctuaries in which the forces of order might regroup. In his eyes, the sorrow of countless generations mixed with the steely resolve of one who had guarded forbidden lore against all odds. The clashing of opposing forces reached a crescendo as the cult leader and Roderick met amid the burning ruins. Their duel was not merely a contest of physical might, but a battle for the very soul of the cathedral. Roderick's sword, alight with the sacred glow of dragon fire, parried the searing strikes of the cult leader's unholy flame. Sparks flew as metal met enchanted fire, each impact echoing like the tolling of a death knell for the old order. The duel was fierce and intimate, a ballet of defiance set against the backdrop of collapsing sacred art. Roderick's face, smeared with sweat, soot, and grim determination, set the rhythm for his every move. With a deft maneuver, he sidestepped a sweeping arc of malignant flame and drove his blade forward with the force of a falling star. The cult leader snarled, recoiling as the sacred fire momentarily overwhelmed his dark power. For an instant, the clamor of battle hushed, and all eyes fixated on the duel unfolding at the cathedral's heart, a timeless struggle between the purity of reclaimed flame blood and the corrupt hunger of incendiary fanaticism. As the duel raged, the cavernous space around them shuddered from the strain of conflicting energies. Above, the remnants of broken stained glass vibrated as if attempting to reassemble themselves in defiant tribute to lost glory. The sacred chants of the defenders, rising in unison from the various pockets of resistance throughout the hall, intermingled with the roars and curses of the cultists. Time itself seemed to waver at the juncture of this titanic confrontation, as if the very fabric of destiny were being rewoven in the crucible of conflict. In the midst of that blinding conflagration, a sudden surge of divine intervention rippled through the sacred space. The ancient dragon spirits, long silent in the wake of mortal neglect, stirred in response to the extremity of the battle. Ethereal silhouettes of mighty dragons, their scales aglow with celestial fire, appeared for brief transcendent moments above the shattered vaults. Their roars, echoing from across the chasm of time, seemed to merge with the incantations of Brother Bastian and the heartfelt appeals of Lady Eleanor, lending a spectral reinforcement to the defenders' cause. It was a sign, a stirring of the old covenant, and it ignited a surge of renewed hope even as the tide of chaos threatened to overwhelm the beleaguered sanctuary. Emboldened by these apparitions, Roderick's strikes grew more resolute. With a yell that blended defiance and supplication, he redoubled his efforts, channeling every ounce of ancient sacred energy into each carefully executed attack. His blade cut through the hot, suffocating air, sparking arcs of pure luminous flame that challenged the cult leader's dark incantations. The duel wove in and out of the tumult of the larger battle, a microcosm of the ceaseless tug-of-war between order and chaos, hope and destruction. All around the central melee, the battle raged with unrelenting fervor. Lady Eleanor and Brother Bastian coordinated with the scattered defenders, moving from one pocket of strife to another, channeling their magic to shield the weak and counter the cult's relentless assault. Every fallen cultist, every shattered remnant of corrupted magic, testified to the grim resolve of those who sought to reclaim their legacy. But even as the defenders repelled wave after wave of incendiary onslaughts, the cult's numbers appeared inexhaustible, drawn onward by a fanatic devotion to a vision that promised nothing but the obliteration of all they once held sacred. In one heart-stopping moment, when the cult leader's dark power seemed poised to engulf the entire sanctuary in irreversible flame, a resounding command echoed from the ranks of the defenders. For the covenant of the flame blood, for the dragons, the cry, hoarse and resolute, rippled through the cathedral as one unified heartbeat. Inspired by this surge, every ally, knight, mage, and humble supplicant alike, found within themselves a last reservoir of courage and defiance. With synchronized precision, they pushed forward, directing their combined powers at the nexus of the cult's infernal energies. The resulting burst of magical force was cataclysmic, a searing explosion of light and heat that temporarily cleaved the battlefield in twain. In that incandescent flash, the cult leader's dark incantations faltered, and his hold over the unbridled flames weakened momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Roderick pressed his advantage, channeling the full fury of his flame-blood spirit in a singular decisive strike. His blade, now a living conduit of sacred fire, pierced the heart of the cult leader's dark aura, causing a shockwave that sent cultists scattering in disarray. As the conflagration receded, the echoes of that singular blow reverberated throughout the crumbling cathedral. The enemies, now leaderless and unmoored by the abrupt collapse of their unholy majesty, staggered backward in a frenzied retreat. Yet the victory was bittersweet, a momentary reprieve in a battle that had claimed countless innocents and shaken the very foundations of the sacred site. In the glowing aftermath, amidst flickering embers and shattered chants, Roderick and his comrades stood battered but unbowed, their eyes, reflecting both the devastation of battle and the stubborn flame of renewal, locked in a silent accord. The sacred covenant of the flame blood must be preserved, even if the price were the very soul of their world. In the final throes of the battle, as the defenders rallied to extinguish the last vestiges of the cult's insurgency, the vast cathedral seemed to exhale a mournful sigh, a lament for what had been lost, and yet a celebration of the indomitable spirit that had for one fleeting glorious moment reclaimed its birthright. The divine apparitions of the dragon spirits, now slowly receding into the mists of memory, bore silent witness to the valor on display, a testament to the eternal struggle between light and darkness that would echo through the ages. Though the night had been rent asunder by fire and fury, and though the cult's dark designs still loomed as a threat on the horizon, the cataclysmic battle within the Ashen Cathedral had forged within the hearts of its defenders a renewed pledge. In that sacred smoldering ruin, amidst the ruin of ancient stones and the spectral glow of reclaimed magic, Sir Roderick, Lady Eleanor, and Brother Bastian vowed to protect the true essence of the Flame Blood Covenant at all costs. Their swords still dripped with the residual flame of divine fire, their incantations still resonated with the hope of renewal, and in their eyes shone the unquenchable promise of a legacy reborn from the very crucible of their trials. As the last echoes of the battle faded into a heavy, reverent silence, the defenders gathered in the midst of the shattered nave. Though exhausted, battered, and scarred by the unholy conflict, they held fast to a singular radiant conviction that the sacred fire of the dragons would forever illuminate the path of redemption, even when cast against the consuming darkness. And as the battered warriors began to tend to the wounded and gather what could be salvaged from the smoldering remnants of their once revered sanctuary, the promise of a new dawn stirred amid the ruins, a dawn in which the true power of the flame blood would rise, tempered by sacrifice, united by honor, and destined to burn eternally in the hearts of those brave enough to wield it. Beneath the shattered vaults of the once revered Ashen Cathedral, the weight of ruin and defilement had reached its zenith. The battle-scarred sanctuary now lay in a tense, haunted silence, a silence heavy with both regret and the anticipation of redemption. In this final moment, when the last vestiges of the Ember Covenant's unrestrained chaos flickered in the twilight, Sir Roderick, Lady Eleanor, and Brother Bastian gathered in the inner sanctum, the very heart of the sacred edifice. The space around the ancient altar pulsated as if alive, its stone surfaces etched with the stories of countless ages, whispering secrets of rituals long forgotten, yet never truly lost. The air was thick with the mingled aromas of scorched incense and ancient stone, and the faint glow of residual, benevolent ember magic shimmered like a promise on the walls. Here in the sanctum where the covenant of flame blood was forged and many a noble soul had been anointed by the fire of the dragons, the defenders prepared to perform the rite that would forever seal the fate of their world. The cult's dark influence, though vastly diminished in the wake of the earlier cataclysm, still lingered like a malignant stain amid the echoes of sacred hymns. Roderick stepped forward, his expression a tumult of resolve and sorrow. His armor, dented and smeared with the remnants of battle, bore witness to the long and painful journey that had led him to this precipice. In his hand he held the ancient sword, its blade tempered by the pure divine fires of dragonkind, a weapon that had been his steadfast companion through untold struggles, and which now glowed with an almost otherworldly radiance. "This is the hour of reckoning," he declared, his voice resonating in the hallowed space as he addressed his steadfast allies. "We stand upon the brink of our past and our future. To banish this corruption, we must offer ourselves to the sacred flame, that it may purify the ashes of our legacy and light a new path for all who believe in the grace of the flame blood." Lady Eleanor, her eyes alight with both fierce determination and a haunting tenderness, nodded in solemn agreement. Her mastery over ember magic had been honed over years of tempered sorrow and fiery passion, and now it was called upon not to dominate but to heal. Raising her delicate hands, she traced luminous sigils in the air, symbols of renewal and sacrifice passed down from the time of the dragon priests. "Let our hearts merge with the true essence of flame," she intoned softly, her voice a gentle counterpoint to the harsh echoes of past battles. "May the eternal spark of creation burn away the dark remnants of fanaticism and bring forth a dawn where our covenant is reborn in purity and truth." Beside them, Brother Bastian assumed his place with the quiet dignity of one who had safeguarded the ancient lore for generations. The venerable monk, whose eyes glimmered with the wisdom of countless forgotten eras, carefully unrolled a brittle parchment, the final testament of the original Flameblood rite. His voice, subdued yet imbued with a timeless authority, recited the sacred verses etched into the scroll, words that had once united mortal hearts with the divine fire of the dragons. "By the ancient covenant and with the grace of the sacred flame," he proclaimed, his tone steady amid the tumult of his inner emotions, "we offer our very selves as a sacrifice, a bond forged not in the pursuit of endless power, but in the selfless act of renewal. With this ritual, let the corrupted fire be cast out forever, and the true spirit of ember magic be reborn in its purest form." Surrounded by the profound silence of their consecrated chamber, the three prepared to merge their essences with the divine flame. A circle was drawn upon the flagstone floor around the ancient altar, a circle symbolic of unity, eternity, and the never-ending cycle of creation and decay. Each movement was deliberate, each glance exchanged an unspoken covenant among warriors, weary of endless conflict, but alight with the hope of transformation. Roderick placed his gauntleted hand upon the cool surface of the altar, the ancient stone seeming to pulse at his touch. Lady Eleanor and Brother Bastian did the same, their fingers meeting the weathered carvings as if to awaken the latent power embedded in the foundation of the cathedral. In that moment, the air trembled with the resonance of an age-old promise. Outside the sanctum, the distant sounds of retreating cultists and the subdued cries of those who had suffered the unholy onslaught were swallowed by the overwhelming presence of ancient reformed magic. The ritual began with a deep sonorous chant, the very words of the original rite that blended sorrow with exaltation. The defenders' voices melded with the whispered hymns of the old stone, creating a tapestry of sound that transcended mortal language. With every syllable uttered, the boundaries between the physical and the divine blurred further. The shimmering embers scattered around the altar grew in number, coalescing into a luminous vortex that danced with the hues of sunrise and the tender gold of eternal hope. As the vortex swirled, Roderick felt a surge of power and purpose, like never before, a fire that was not designed to consume recklessly, but to purify and renew. His memories of past failures, the harrowing echoes of regret, and the long-standing scars of his disgrace began to melt away under the transformative blaze. Instead, a new warmth blossomed within him, a warmth imbued with the forgiveness of the ancient dragon spirits and the promise of a legacy reclaimed. In that blinding conflagration of sacred energy, his soul was laid bare, every fragment of its being becoming one with the incandescent light. One by one, his comrades felt their own spirits ignite. Lady Eleanor's ember magic, once a tool of healing and combative brilliance, now became a gentle, nurturing flame that enveloped her in an aura of compassionate strength. With each word of the ancient incantation, her inner fire grew steadier, softening the fierce edges of her former resolve and replacing them with the balanced glow of redemption. Brother Bastian, the silent guardian of lore, experienced a profound illumination within, a clarity that dispelled the long shadows of sorrow and granted him a vision of what the future might hold if they succeeded. At the crescendo of the ritual, the divine vortex expanded to engulf the trio entirely. In an explosion of radiant, pure flame, a shockwave of energy burst forth, reverberating through the vaulted sanctuary and out into the very foundations of the Ashen Cathedral. The raging conflagration of corrupted fire that had once threatened to consume everything was drawn inexorably into the vortex, as though the sacred flame itself had reached out to reclaim its lost domain. For a heart-stopping moment, time seemed to hold its breath as the purging flame battled the dark remnants of the cult's unholy power. Then, with a final surge of overwhelming brilliance, the corrupted energies were vanquished, swept away like the dying embers of a long-forgotten pyre. A deep and resolute silence reigned over the sanctum, as if the very stones of the cathedral exhaled in relief. Slowly the vortex dissipated, leaving behind a soft, pulsating glow that suffused every corner of the sacred space. In that gentle radiance, the true covenant of flame blood magic was restored, a covenant not defined by the unending lust for power, but by the impermanent, ever-renewing spark of hope, sacrifice, and ultimate transcendence. When the light finally faded into an everlasting serene gleam, Roderick, Eleanor, and Bastian found themselves transformed. Their eyes, once darkened with the weight of past regrets, now shone with a tender luminescence, a reflection of both the divine sacrifice they had embraced and the rebirth of their sacred legacy. The walls of the Ashen Cathedral, no longer marred by the defilement of the Ember Covenant, glowed softly in a palette of gentle amber and celestial gold, as though the very structure had been reborn in the image of a long-lost paradise. In the aftermath of the ritual's cataclysmic splendor, the remnants of the dark cult were no longer a menace. Their malignant influence had been expunged from the heart of the sacred site, leaving only the promise of renewal. The citizens of the ruined city, who had long suffered in the shadows of fanatic terror, began to emerge from hiding, their eyes wide with tentative hope as the whispers of reborn magic wound through the streets. The old order, battered by unrelenting strife but not vanquished, now faced the dawn with a renewed sense of purpose and a collective vow to honor the impermanence of power. Standing amidst the quiet reformation of the cathedral, Sir Roderick lifted his eyes to the fractured, yet resplendent, stained glass overhead. "This is our rebirth," he spoke softly, his voice carrying both solemnity and the promise of endless possibility. "Let our sacrifice be the spark that lights the future, a future where our covenant remains not as a chain that binds us, but as a flame that guides us through the dark and into a horizon radiant with hope." Lady Eleanor and Brother Bastian joined him in that quiet moment of shared triumph and pensive reflection. In the fading echoes of the ancient chants and the newfound murmur of gentle winds through hallowed arches, they recognized that their struggle had reshaped more than just the fate of a singular sanctum. It had kindled the embers of a legacy that would burn eternal in the hearts of all who believed in the sanctity of the flame blood. And so, with the sacred glow of renewal lighting their path, the transformed guardians stepped out into a world reborn. The Ashen Cathedral, once a symbol of decay and despair, now stood as a beacon of transcendent hope, a living monument to the power of sacrifice, the beauty of impermanence, and the enduring promise that every end may herald a miraculous new beginning.